Your story is nothing without a premise. So let's find yours. You want to write a story, but every time you sit down to write, your mind goes blank. Or maybe you have a cool idea, but every time you go to explain it, it just falls flat. The problem? You don't have a clear premise. But don't worry. I'm going to show you how to find one and how to turn your idea into a story that actually works. Whether you're just getting started with your story or preparing to query, knowing your story premise is invaluable because you don't want to make the same mistake that I did. So I have a friend that I have known since middle school, and she is a published #1 best-selling author. I told her the last time I saw her that I was getting interested in writing again, and she asked me what ideas I had. When I went to tell her about my favorite idea, I spent a good 30 minutes rambling before she said, "You just told me all about your world, but you don't have a story yet." And she was absolutely right. And that was because I had no idea what the premise of my story was at the time. But what is a story premise? The premise is the central concept of your story stated as simply as possible. 2 sentences max, but one is better. Why is it important? If you're just starting your story, it can give your story direction, which in turn will make plotting and writing easier.
But Stephanie, I'm a discovery writer.
That's absolutely fine. I am not one to say that one type of writing is better than another, but you still need to develop your premise. Even if you don't know what it is until you've finished your story, that can severely help you in the editing process moving forward. So how do you find out what your premise is? There are 5 key questions that you need to be able to answer in order to find your premise. And they are, number 1, who is your main character? Number 2, what world do they live in? Number 3, what do they want? Number 4, what obstacles do they face? And number 5, what's at stake if they fail? So let's take a look at this premise of The Matrix to see how it answers these 5 questions. In a dystopian future where humanity is unknowingly trapped inside a simulated reality, Neo is let out of the simulation and invited to join the war against intelligent machines that harvest humans as an energy source. So, who is the main character? It's Neo. And who is Neo? He's a human trapped inside a simulated reality. What world does Neo live in? He lives in a dystopian future. What obstacles does Neo face? War with intelligent machines. And what's at stake if Neo fails? He'll be harvested as an energy source. Or die, that's implied. While this premise is shown as a statement, you can also have your premise be in the form of a what-if question. For example, what if a young woman volunteered to participate in a deadly game to save her sister? So let's break down this premise. If you haven't guessed it yet, this is a premise statement for The Hunger Games. Who is the main character? A young woman. So you don't necessarily need to use your character name in your premise statement, but you do need to have an idea about who this person is. What world does she live in? A world that runs deadly games. While this premise doesn't specifically state that the world is dystopian, it is heavily implied by this statement. What does she want? To save her sister. What obstacles does she face? A deadly game. And what's at stake if she fails? She or her sister dies because the game is deadly. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to pause this video and go ask yourself these 5 questions about your story. Then write your premise as a statement and as a what-if question. Pick your favorite and write it in the comments below. If you just want to let me know that you're here, put a bow or arrow or some kind of emoji in the comments. So your premise is the heartbeat of your story. Without it, your story dies. Nail this, and the rest of your journey becomes so much easier. And this week on FReadom, as far as I know, there has been no additional movement on NCHB 83 and Oklahoma SB 593. But I did discover a great resource for my research this week, and that is FReeLibrary. FReeLibrary helps public, school, and college libraries win funding at the ballot box in order to ensure stable funding for libraries for generations to come. And they also support grassroots groups across the country in order to combat book banning, illicit political interference, and library closure. And they have an amazing legislation tracker on their website. And that tracker tracks all bills of concern, though I did notice that NCHB 83 was not on it. But I will have the description in the link below if you want to check to see if there are any policies you should be aware of in your local community. At the time of making this video, the most recent legislation on their list was Illinois House Bill 2817. And this requires digital libraries to block obscene content. But again, as we find with so many languages of these bills, the vague language could be meant to be interpreted in a broad array, which could mean the overblocking of important educational material, like books on history, health, and LGBTQ plus books. And if the providers don't comply, they could lose access to really valuable resources. And again, teachers and librarians could face legal risks. In all, this is another bill that could lead to widespread censorship, making it harder for students to learn and experience different perspectives. If you like this video, but maybe you don't have an idea for your next story yet, you should watch my video on how to find story ideas without AI here. Let's see what stories tomorrow brings.